you used the internet lately? If you have, you've most likely heard about this brand new game called Palworld, which has been taking the gaming community by storm. It's even managed to break Steam records for the most concurrent players in history, which is just bonkers. But this commercial success, I believe, isn't out of nowhere, and I genuinely am really happy for the developers, Pocketpair, for making a game that so many people seem to love, even if the majority are just here for a little while it's popular, and the consistent player base is yet to be whittled out from the release numbers. I've actually been passively watching the development progress of Palworld since its first few teasers from a few years ago. I'm not going to say I knew about Palworld before anyone else, because that's just flat out not true. However, I will say that I'm probably one of the first few thousand people who had Palworld on their radar. So this release is surprisingly personal to me. Not many games nowadays have me excited for a release and just patiently waiting for it to come out. The last few I can remember being Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, the most recent entry in my favorite video game franchise of all time, and Exoprimal, a game that tries to scratch the itch for dinosaurs and thick robots ever present in my head. Rift Apart managed to exceed my expectations, and I've recently beaten my second 100% playthrough on the second highest difficulty in challenge mode, and I'm planning to do a third playthrough on the hardest difficulty. I love this game, it's great. Exoprimal, unfortunately, it kind of fell flat. I still like the game, but most people don't, so the player base is slim, and I can never really find the time to sit down and play it. Thanks, Capcom. I really wanted a PvP-only horde shooter where the game is constantly comparing me to how well the enemy team is doing. That's really cool. But anyway, this video is about Palworld. Palworld, thankfully, is more akin to my experience with Rift Apart rather than Exoprimal. Comparing those two is a bit unfair, though, seeing as how Rift Apart is now sitting next to Bloodborne as my favorite game ever, and frankly, Palworld isn't even close to that seat. As for unfair comparisons, though, it's no secret that basically everyone is pitting Palworld against Game Freak's monster hit franchise, Pokemon. And that totally makes sense. They both have a series of monsters that you can run around and collect using ball-shaped throwable projectiles that inexplicably suck up the entirety of said monster into a baseball-sized enclosure that may or may not have some weird digital cyberspace inside, and the details on are pretty muddy at best. Additionally, they both have a system where you can put these monsters in your party, 5 for Palworld, 6 for Pokemon, and you take them around with you. You can train with them, you can fight with them, play with them, and even nickname them, which apparently I'm in the minority of, where I actually nickname all of my Pokemon and pals. So that's cool. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that in the Venn diagram of Palworld versus Pokemon, there is quite a lot of bleed over. Palworld has even famously been accused of straight up copying and ripping off Pokemon designs, which, after taking a look at the Pal deck, you can definitely see that. You've got Cinderace, you've got Salazzle, Pachirisu, Milotic mixed with a little bit of Superior, Staraptor mixed with Mega Pidgeot, a 3-part mixture of Zoroark, Houndoom, and Lucario, which is fucking awesome, by the way, and Jigglypuff. Okay, some of the comparisons I've seen people make are a little bit more than a stretch, but the point is there are quite a few designs in Palworld that have definitely taken quite a bit of inspiration from Pokemon. There's even a Pal that draws heavy inspiration from Gliscor in its design, and much like how Gliscor is my third favorite Pokemon, I also like Tombat a whole heck of a lot. There are even designs that take heavy and clear inspiration from other monster-related franchises, like one of my personal favorites, Monster Hunter. 2 examples of this being Piran Noct and Blaze Howl and Blaze Howl Noct, which very obviously take inspiration from Orochi Kirin, Teostra, and Lunastra. Though, to be fair, I will also mention that Kirin, Teo, and Lunastra are all based off of existing mythical creatures anyway. Kirin being the Chinese legend of the Qilin, and Teo and Lunastra being the Persian/Greek legend of the Manticore. I've heard from my friend who is a Final Fantasy nut that there's also some designs in here that take inspiration from Final Fantasy characters and monsters. But I can't speak much on that because I've only played Final Fantasy 9 and a tiny bit of 12. So, I guess Wixen has a big red hat like Freya does, and is also a clear ripoff of Delphox. The point here is that Palworld takes inspiration from a ton of different monsters from a ton of different series, chief among being Pokemon, likely because it's the biggest franchise in the world. Of course, they're going to take that one primarily. This fact is important to mention because while quite a few people consider Palworld and its designs to be a blatant and egregious ripoff of a ton of existing designs, it's not just ripping off a single franchise. It's taking design notes from a ton of different series with a ton of different styles and execution, instead of just being one of a novemdecillion different terrible Chinese Pokemon knockoffs you could find all over the place on the Google Play Store back in the day. God, I hope those are gone. Way I see it, with Palworld taking notes from so many different series, you can look at it in one of three ways. First, which what I believe is the case, is that Palworld is a parody. The second is that simply it's the passion project of a ton of different people with a love of Pokemon and a bunch of other monster-related games, and they wanted to make their own. And of course, the third is to just completely disregard any reason and just shit on Palworld endlessly for being a cheap copy, which is, I guess you always have that option. Let's work our way backwards through that list in order of what I have to say. The third point, it's pretty clearly unfair. Though I will say some people can have a bit of a point of argument because Pocketpair has made a game in the past that quote-unquote utilizes AI art. So that could put the idea in people's heads that they could have used AI to generate the concepts for PALs as well. However, that game in question is called AI Art Imposter. Taking a brief look at the description and synopsis of the game, you can clearly see that the objective of this party game, much like a Jackbox minigame, is to generate AI images according to a theme, which one person does not know the theme and needs to fool the others into thinking that they do. Can't say for sure that the actual designs for this game were made by AI, but I doubt it. My point is that this game wasn't made with AI. It's just using AI as the mechanic for its Jackbox-esque Among Us game. Do I think it's a good game? No. Do I play it? Also no, and I have no plans to. This idea has been done before, to the T, just not using AI art. But I think it's unfair to accuse Pocketpair of using AI to make Palworld, especially considering it's been in development for multiple years, as I can personally attest to. As an actual artist that also plays with AI art every once in a while, I can with 100% certainty say that Palworld would have finished a lot quicker and look a lot worse if they actually did use AI for it. AI art is brain dead easy to use. Don't let any AI quote-unquote artist tell you otherwise. Now, for the second perspective, I can totally see this being the case. With how many different series Palworld takes notes from, it's easy to see that, at least to some extent, there are plenty of people on the team that passionately love these different series. Even just from the Pokemon side, making Fakemon is a huge part of the community. I've even done a little bit of myself in the past, and I want to make more Fakemon now that I've improved my art. And then you have the subcategory of Fakemon being Pokemon Fusions, which famously had its own fan game made in the form of Pokemon Infinite Fusion, a game you no doubt saw if you've used TikTok or YouTube Shorts basically at all in 2023. At Palworld, you have at least what I see as primarily original designs like Ruby that take inspiration from multiple existing Pokemon like Deerling, Flareon, and a little bit of Sylveon, where, yes, the comparison is there, but this is much more clearly just the result of an artist who made a Fakemon based off of some of their favorite Pokemon and had the chance to put it into an official game. Or, one of my favorites, Incineram, which takes notes from Zoroark, Houndoom, and Lucario and mixes them with the idea of Krampus or even the Goatman cryptid and makes it into this genuinely awesome admitted edgelord of a PAL. Then you can scooch over to look at its variant, Incineram Noct, which replaces some of those notes with the lore inaccurate but totally badass depiction of the Winnebago. I know how it's actually pronounced, I just don't feel comfortable saying it. I grew up around Native American culture, and talking about the real deal actually just kind of sketches me out, like, way hard. So I feel, for the most part, a lot of the more original designs like Ruby and Incineram lend an air of appreciation for the series that they're derived from, and, in my eyes, absolutely shine a spotlight on some hardcore Pokemon fans on the dev team. Probably ones that have made Fakemon in the past. Hell, I wouldn't even be surprised if Ruby wasn't even made for this game and was just an existing design that an artist had made in the past. And now for the first perspective, which I believe is the primary case of Palworld being a parody. If you take into account all the designs that take clear inspiration, or in some cases, directly copy the homework of other series, then take a look at what Palworld actually is and what it's gotten famous and countless media screen time for, it's pretty obvious to me that, at least in some regard, Palworld is a parody. Though I will say it is likely primarily of Pokemon. Pokemon, basically since its inception and rise to fame, has been accused of promoting animal cruelty and pit fighting by out-of-touch boomers and totally batshit insane out-of-touch boomers. And aside from the hilarious point that excessively religious people use of Pokemon forcing the idea of evolution on their kids, this has been Pokemon's biggest consistent controversy over its lifespan. You also had the controversy of the original airing of Electric Warrior Porygon, but thankfully that was a one-off thing before it was taken off the air. And, you know, Lavender Town Syndrome, which was just a totally bullshit creepypasta, but I figured I'd mention it. With that being said, if you take the primary thing that Pokemon was accused of and made fun of for being, quote-unquote, promoting animal cruelty and pit fighting, and you look at Palworld, A game that lets you force your monsters to work in sweatshops, and lets you abuse them, and lets you force them to fight and die so you can get resources, I think it becomes pretty obvious that Palworld is parodying Pokemon using their most prominent point of controversy from the last 20 or so years. Then when it comes to design, you have pals like Lavender, which is a blatantly obvious riff on the real Pokemon that actually exists, Salazzle. Salazzle is an unapologetically horny Pokemon design, and to the extent that Nintendo will allow, is also canonically a horny Pokemon. Multiple of its Pokedex entries referencing how a single female Salazzle will have a harem of male Salandit that serve its every need. Then you have Lavender, which takes Salazzle's hilarious idea of being an excessively horny lizard in a children's game and turns it up to 11 because this game isn't made for kids. Its PAL deck entry, while not stating it directly, heavily implies that Lavender will chase down literally anything with a pulse for the express purpose of a quote-unquote night of love. This thing is so down bad, it will literally chase down anything that catches its eye so it can have snoo snoo. That's hilarious. I bring up these two horny lizards for a good reason, trust me. If you take a look at Salazzle and her canon lore, then take a look at Lavender and its canon lore, I think that it is the single most obvious parody potentially in the entire game. Pocketpair took the most peculiar / controversial part of Salazzle, being its insanely horny concept and design, and made their own monster, parodying the idea by turning it up to a manic degree. That is textbook parody. The definition of parody is an imitation of the style of a particular writer, artist, or genre with deliberate exaggeration for comic effect. That is exactly what Lavender is. It's perfect. With all of these ideas and points in mind, I genuinely believe that it's unfair to flame Palworld for being a ripoff of Pokemon or any other franchise. It's simply a game made by a team of people with a shared interest in quite a few different games. So in short, it's a team of developers. Similarly, I also don't think it's fair to flame Pokemon or Game Freak for their games being quote-unquote inferior to Palworld. Despite its similarities, at its heart, Palworld is closer to being a ripoff of Rust or Ark Survival, or fuck it, even Fortnite. Specifically Save the World, though. Objectively, Pokemon and Palworld are barely comparable when it comes to gameplay. Gameplay-wise, the only thing they have in common is that you collect monsters and have them fight. Palworld is an open-world survival crafting third-person shooter with creature collector elements. Pokemon is a turn-based creature collector strategy RPG. The creature collector is an active part of its genre instead of an addition or afterthought. Palworld is more comparable to Minecraft, with either the Pixelmon or Cobblemon mods installed, rather than Pokemon itself. To argue whether Pokemon or Palworld is better than the other is really comparing apples to oranges. Yes, they're both fruit, but they vary wildly in almost every other regard. Texture, taste, sugar content, even the way you're supposed to eat it. Saying Palworld is better than Pokemon is like saying that Ark is a better version of Final Fantasy because you can tame creatures in both Ark and Final Fantasy 13 too. They're just totally different games. So, in closing, no. I do not think that Palworld was made with AI, and I also believe that both sides of the argument are wrong and correct in their own regards. Pokemon fans are right in their accusation of Palworld taking heavy inspiration from Pokemon designs, and Palworld fans are right in saying that it's its own game and can stand on its own. Pokemon fans are wrong to accuse Palworld of being a cheap, lazy ripoff of Pokemon. Palworld fans are wrong to accuse Pokemon of being an inferior game because the two are only tangentially related in the first place. And in general, people are wrong to make fun of Pokemon looking worse graphically than Palworld. Like, dude, one is a PC and Xbox Series game, and the other is exclusive to an outdated and underpowered handheld console. No shit, Pokemon looks worse. They already have to push the Switch to its limit to fit in everything to make an even par at best Pokemon game. Yeah, Scarlet and Violet looks like trash and runs like shit. That's the Switch's fault for being an LS-swapped Leap Pad. On a whole, I like Palworld, and I like Pokemon. Palworld is a fun and wacky game with elements from the tried-and-true creature collector that has been by my side literally my entire life. I'm gonna keep playing Palworld, and I'm gonna keep playing Pokemon. Both are fun, and they scratch different itches. Before I close off, I want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons, which you can join the likes of for just $5 a month. You'll get work in progress art, whether it be for thumbnails or just something I happen to be working on, full resolution art, and early access to videos the moment they're ready, instead of having to wait until Friday like everyone else. Additionally, I'll start taking suggestions from my patrons on games to play for the channel once I get enough patrons to fund whichever game you want me to play. If any of this strikes your fancy, head to the link in the description and check out my Patreon. I'll appreciate it even if you don't end up supporting me. I hope you enjoyed this departure from my usual type of videos, and if you did, consider dropping it a like. I know I don't really do stuff like this, but I've been playing Palworld a lot recently, so I wanted to speak my mind on all of the hubbub going around about it. If you genuinely enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like, and make sure to hit that subscribe button to become a pup if you haven't already, and to hit the bell so it actually does something. If you want to support me in the channel, you can support me on Patreon for just $5 a month, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks. My name's Vixie, and I'll see you all in the next one.